A crippled old hag is in the way. Go home. You're an eyesore.
What?
You're seriously going to attend this wedding like that? You've got to be joking.
The two of them hurled insults at me and started giggling. Both Sarah and James stared in disbelief, just like I did.
Robert and Mary are right. Just go home.
To my shock, Emily said it too. Well, I'll be going home.
Mom?
Sarah, could you ask the venue staff to call a taxi? I made this request to Sarah. She reluctantly stepped away and headed to the staff. Seeing this, Emily, Robert, and Mary smirked and sneered. Just then, a man who had been listening to our conversation approached me. My name is Susan, and I'm turning 70 this year. Currently, I live with my husband, James. James is also 70, but even after retirement, he continues to work for the same company under a rehire program. We thought we'd spend our golden years relaxing together, but I'm grateful he's still healthy and able to work. We have 2 daughters, our eldest, Emily, and our youngest, Sarah. I married late in life and gave birth to Emily when I was 38 and to Sarah when I was 40. Raising kids wasn't easy, but now that both have grown into wonderful adults, I feel we've lived a happy life. The biggest challenge I faced as a mother was with Emily. Because she was a late-in-life baby, James and I were overjoyed when she was born.
It's like seeing my own grandchild.
My mother in particular said this and cried when Emily was born. Since I was an only child, I was the only one who could give my parents a grandchild. They never pressured me to get married or have kids, but my mother's tears that day were tears of genuine longing for a grandchild. That moment is something I'll never forget. Both my mother and father have passed away now, but when Emily was born, everyone was overjoyed. It was the classic first grandchild fever in our family. Later, when I got pregnant with Sarah, Emily was spoiled by James and both sets of grandparents. Of course, Emily was adorable and we cherished her, but taking care of Sarah also required a lot of attention. Parenting for the first time was tough, but I felt truly happy during those days raising both of them. However, when Emily was in 5th grade and Sarah was in 3rd, one day, Sarah came home absolutely filthy. It looked like she had fallen hard on her bottom because the back of her skirt was covered in mud. Not only that, but her top was also stained with mud. Sarah usually didn't play that rough, so it didn't seem like she got dirty just from playing. I was wide-eyed and asked her, "Sarah, what happened? You're so dirty. Wait, you're hurt."
They were mean to me.
Sarah said this with tears welling up in her eyes. Looking closer, I saw she had a bandage on her knee. "What do you mean? Who did this?" But Sarah didn't say anything more. I thought maybe it was just a fight, and I didn't want to assume she was completely innocent, but I needed to contact the school and figure out what happened. Thinking that, I decided to wait for Emily to come home, hoping she might know something.
I'm home.
After a while, the front door opened. I welcomed Emily in and asked her, "Welcome back. How was school today?"
Nothing special. Just normal.
I see. It seems like someone was mean to Sarah. Do you know anything about it? At those words, Emily froze for a moment.
No, I don't know.
It didn't feel like she really didn't know, but she said it so nonchalantly. "Please, just tell me anything you know."
I told you, I don't know. Maybe Sarah just fell by herself. I need to do my homework, so don't bother me.
Emily, you said she fell. That means you know her clothes were dirty and that she got hurt, right? I only said that Sarah mentioned someone was mean to her. I hadn't meant to interrogate her, but something about Emily's words felt off, and I pressed her. Emily's face showed a flash of panic, but then she doubled down.
So what? It's Sarah's fault.
What do you mean? Did you do something mean to her?
It wasn't being mean. It's her fault.
I couldn't believe it. It was Emily who had been mean to Sarah. What happened? Why would you do that to Sarah? If it wasn't your fault, then you can tell me, right? When I asked her again, Emily frowned and said,
Because Sarah said she was going to ask you to come to the school open day.
What?
Everyone else's moms are young and pretty, but you're old. I didn't want to be embarrassed by people thinking you're my grandma. I told Sarah not to say anything about the open day.
I widened my eyes in shock. I never imagined I was the cause, and Emily's words left me deeply hurt and speechless. From that day on, neither Sarah nor Emily mentioned the open day to me again. Sarah probably wanted me to come, but she stayed quiet out of consideration for Emily. I found out about the school open day later through the school newsletter. But thinking about both of them, there was no way I could say I was looking forward to it. On the day, I quietly peeked into Sarah's classroom and then went straight home. I felt regret for not going to Emily's class, but I told myself this was for the best. If I went, Emily would only feel embarrassed. From that point on, I limited my visits to the school to the bare minimum. After Emily graduated from elementary school, I started attending Sarah's open days, but Emily didn't like it.
Mom, don't come to school. My friend's younger siblings are there. They'll find out you're my mom.
Even though I knew it was just her being a teenager, those words still hurt.
Don't worry about it.
On the other hand, Sarah offered me kind words, and her kindness saved me. Both of them continued to grow up well, and after Emily graduated high school, she went to university and moved out. The university was in the neighboring state, so commuting wasn't impossible, but since Emily hadn't done much housework before, living on her own would be a good experience.
Make sure you keep up with the cleaning, laundry, and cooking. We're not sending you off so you can live a lazy life.
I know. I'll have a part-time job, so maybe not every day, but I'll manage.
James gave her a firm reminder as we saw her off. I worried about Emily and frequently contacted her. Are you eating well? How's school? I knew she'd get annoyed if I was too persistent, so by frequently, I mean once every 2 weeks to a month. At first, Emily would reply with just a few words. But by her sophomore year, she stopped responding. Sarah, can you try reaching out to Emily? She's ignoring my messages.
Just leave her alone.
Even though Sarah said that, she still contacted Emily for me. Not every time, but the chances of getting a reply were higher when Sarah reached out.
She says she's at work.
I see. She must be busy with her job. Knowing she was okay reassured me. But by the winter of her sophomore year, she stopped replying to anyone. Sarah was preparing for her exams at high school, and I didn't want to take up her time worrying about Emily. They say no news is good news, but after about 3 months of silence, I couldn't stand it any longer and decided to visit Emily's place. Of course, I told her I was coming. But since she hadn't replied, I didn't know if she had seen the message. Early in the morning, carrying homemade side dishes and vegetables, I rang Emily's doorbell.
I'm coming.
Emily opened the door with a sleepy expression.
What?
The moment she saw my face, she muttered with a look of annoyance. I told you I was coming today, didn't I?
Did you? So, what do you want?
I was worried because I couldn't get in touch with you. As I spoke, I showed her the bags I'd brought. Are you eating properly? I made you a few things.
I don't need it.
Just take it. I'm coming in for a bit. I pushed past Emily, who tried to resist, and stepped inside. But what I saw shocked me. Clothes were scattered all over the floor, snack wrappers were everywhere, and the sink was piled high with takeout containers and instant noodle cups. What is this mess?
I've been busy.
No matter how busy you are, how can you live in a place like this? As Emily yawned and looked at me, I started tidying up. She didn't help at all and just walked past me to sit on her bed.
Oh yeah, Mom. You have your car, right? Can you take the trash with you? I can't put it out until next Tuesday.
Her words left me speechless. But she was right. I couldn't leave the garbage there. Reluctantly, I started gathering the trash, and Emily smiled with a triumphant look on her face. At that moment, I saw an envelope on the table and froze. It was from the school Emily attended. What's this? Notification of completed withdrawal. Emily's name and those words were written on it. Since there was no address on it, she must have received it in person. I hurriedly pulled the letter out of the envelope. Emily, what is this?
What?
Emily replied casually to my raised voice. But when she saw the envelope in my hand, she realized she was in trouble.
Oh, that. I meant to tell you, but I've been busy with work.
This isn't about work. You dropped out? What's going on? The letter confirmed that Emily had withdrawn from university, and she had done so this past summer, 6 months ago. I had been sending money for her tuition for the fall semester and continued to cover her rent and living expenses after she dropped out. I wasn't giving her money so she could skip school and just work part-time.
But
You're giving up this apartment and moving back home.
are you serious? That's so unfair.
Emily pushed back against the idea, but as her parent, it was the only reasonable decision. After that, I couldn't bring myself to continue cleaning, so I went home and told James everything.
What is she thinking?
James, like me, was furious. I immediately arranged for a moving company and started the process of closing out her apartment. A month later, Emily moved back home, where James and I gave her a stern talking to.
You've ruined my life, Mom.
But Emily showed no sign of remorse. After that, she either locked herself in her room or stayed out for days without coming home. Even so, James and I held on to hope that Emily would reflect on her actions. 10 years had passed since that incident, and a turning point finally came for Emily. For about 5 years after moving back home, Emily kept starting and quitting jobs. But for the past 5 years, she had been working as a temp. It was at that job where she met a man named Steve. After dating for 2 years, Emily and Steve decided to get married. I had met Steve before, and he was a wonderful young man. James and I had once worried if Emily would ever become a responsible adult, but the news of her engagement put our minds at ease. One day, I asked Emily, So, when are we meeting his parents? James has his work, so it'd be good to decide early.
It's fine. Steve's parents are busy too. We'll have the wedding and they can meet you then.
What? But not being able to have a proper conversation worries me. They're going to be your in-laws.
That's so old-fashioned.
Emily had no intention of having a formal meeting or engagement ceremony. And during the wedding itself, there wouldn't be much time for meaningful conversation.
Don't worry. They like me. More importantly, I want the wedding to be extravagant.
Seeing the look on my face, Emily quickly changed the subject. So, Mom, I need your help. Well, of course I'll help. Even though I felt uneasy, I helped Emily with the wedding preparations. After all, Emily and Steve had their jobs, and if Steve's parents were also busy, then I was the only one who could do it. For the month leading up to the wedding, I ran around every single day. I met with florists, coordinated with the venue, scheduled dress fittings, and arranged the seating for over 300 guests. It was to the point where I wondered whose wedding it really was. Then, less than a week before the wedding, while I was at the venue for a final check, I fell down the stairs and got injured. Fortunately, since I was at the venue, a staff member was nearby, and they quickly called an ambulance to take me to the hospital. I had broken my leg and would need to use crutches for a while. Sadly, there was no chance I would recover in time for the wedding. Still, most of the wedding preparations were done, which was a small relief. Then the wedding day arrived.
What happened to your leg?
Oh, I broke it.
That's awful. Please take it easy.
I was wearing a dress, but with crutches and no heels. Guests kept offering me words of concern. Though I felt embarrassed, I was so happy to see Emily's big day that my injury didn't matter. As guests gathered and waited for the ceremony to start, Steve's parents, Robert and Mary, came over to me, followed by Steve and Emily. I was briefly moved by how beautiful Emily looked in her dress, but then Robert and Mary turned to her and asked,
Is this your family?
Yes.
I knew their names from the seating chart, but this was our first time meeting in person. To greet them, I put my hand on my crutches and stood up, supported by Sarah. Seeing me struggle, Robert said,
You look like you're about to fall over. A crippled old hag is in the way. Go home, you're an eyesore.
What?
You're seriously going to attend the wedding like that? You've got to be joking.
The two of them hurled insults at me and started giggling. Both Sarah and James stared in disbelief, just like I did. There was no way this was something you said to your daughter-in-law's parents upon first meeting.
Robert and Mary are right. Just go home.
To my shock, Emily said it too.
Emily?
Sarah, furious, was about to confront Emily, but I smiled calmly. Well, I'll be going home.
Mom.
Sarah, could you ask the venue staff to call a taxi? I made this request to Sarah. She reluctantly stepped away and headed to the staff. Seeing this, Emily, Robert, and Mary smirked and sneered. As I waited for the taxi, Sarah and James spoke to me.
Don't worry about it. You don't have to leave.
Yeah, Mom. You were looking forward to Emily's wedding.
I appreciated their encouragement, but I had finally reached the end of my patience. It's okay. You two should attend. I'll go home once the taxi arrives. Even though Sarah and James insisted on leaving too, I was the only one told to go home. I intended to leave alone, and I let them know that. At that moment, a man who had overheard us approached.
Well, are you leaving?
Yes, I'm sorry. You came all this way.
So, should we cancel the request then? We were here to celebrate Emily's big day with you.
At his words, I gave a small nod. Since I was leaving, there was no longer a reason to celebrate together.
All right, we'll disband then.
The man said this, tapped his smartphone, and sent a message. Suddenly, everyone nearby started checking their phones. Seeing this strange scene, Sarah, James, Robert, Mary, and even Emily looked uneasy. Then, one by one, the guests lifted their heads from their phones, grabbed their bags, and began saying goodbye to me before leaving the venue.
Leaving? What do you mean?
The ceremony hasn't even started yet. Wait a minute.
Emily grabbed the arm of a woman who was about to walk past. It was the same woman who had spoken to me earlier, supposedly one of Emily's friends. She had kindly shown concern for my leg, but in reality, she wasn't a friend at all. She had simply been playing the role of a friend, delivering a flawless performance.
What's going on? We were told it's over.
Over? Why?
At Emily's question, the woman held up her phone for her to see.
The client is leaving, so today's event is canceled. What does this mean?
We came at Susan's request. She asked us to be here and watch over Emily's happiness with her. If the client isn't here, we can't stay either.
With those parting words, the woman left the venue. I thought to myself how businesslike these agencies were. Then, the man who had spoken to me earlier leaned in and whispered quietly,
Don't feel bad. If we didn't do this, they wouldn't learn their lesson.
Surprised, I looked at him. He smiled warmly and gave me a polite nod. Having witnessed the insults thrown at me, he had found a way to strike back on my behalf. It was for me. Realizing this made me feel truly grateful. Emily and the others were panicking, unable to understand what was happening. Seeing their confusion brought me a small sense of relief.
What do you mean by request?
At that moment, Robert turned to me and asked. The truth was, Emily had told me to invite more than 300 guests. But when the invitations were returned, nearly all of them had declined. One of those responses came from the sister of Sarah's friend, so I asked for the reason. It turned out that Emily had never attended any of the weddings she had been invited to. Worse yet, she had made disparaging remarks like, getting married and quitting your job makes you a loser, and relying on a man to survive is pathetic. These comments spread among her friends, and they decided to boycott Emily's wedding. I told Emily about the situation and used a proxy service to have people attend as her friends.
Oh, that's perfect. I don't need friends who are too jealous to come to my wedding.
Of course, Emily agreed to this. I wondered who the jealous one really was, but I let it go. In total, I hired 30 friends, 17 colleagues, 3 mentors, and 20 former bosses, adding up to about 70 people. Now all 70 of them were leaving one by one. The crowd started to murmur, confused by what was happening. I kept quiet, thinking that explaining this to Robert and Mary would be too much for Emily's pride. But Robert voiced his confusion again.
Proxy service? What do you mean? Emily has lots of friends and is so popular, right?
Emily shook her head with a look that begged me not to say anything. But Sarah spoke up instead.
Popular? She's been nasty her whole life, so everyone decided to boycott her wedding.
Boycott?
All of Emily's so-called guests were proxies.
Exposed, Emily glared at Sarah, looking like she was about to cry. Sarah, finally venting her frustrations, laughed. I had always stopped their sibling fights, but today I had no desire to defend Emily. Well then, I'm leaving now. I said that and began preparing to go.
Wait, stop them. Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong.
Emily panicked and tried to stop me again. Robert and Mary looked at Emily with puzzled expressions. They had trusted Emily's attempt to look good and had been deceived. But that didn't justify their insults toward me. Because of our loud argument, the real guests watching the scene frowned in discomfort. Robert and Mary, now under the weight of everyone's judgmental stares, exchanged glances and shrank back, seemingly regretting their earlier words. In the midst of everything, I made eye contact with a man. Wait,
Susan? James?
it really is you, David. When David recognized me and James, he hurried over. James smiled warmly when he saw David. Meanwhile, Robert and Mary's faces grew tense.
So, Steve's partner is Susan and James' daughter?
Robert asked cautiously.
David, well,
Oh, James has been the representative for Smile Corporation, which works with our company. He's now an advisor, but he's been an invaluable help.
Hearing David's introduction, Robert's face turned pale.
And Robert here works as a department head at our company. I've known Steve since he was a kid. I never imagined these two would end up getting married.
David was the only one smiling. Meanwhile, Robert, Mary, Steve, and Emily were all silent, their faces dark with discomfort. As David mentioned, James and he had known each other for a long time. Back when James was in sales, he brought in David's company as a new client and managed the account for years. David's company steadily grew its sales, and thanks to that success, James was promoted to executive vice president during his career. Even now, James' role as an advisor was because of that relationship. Because of this mutually beneficial relationship, I also exchanged greetings with David from time to time.
So, what's all this commotion about?
David asked Robert, his smile unwavering.
well,
As expected, Robert stammered, unable to answer David's question.
Does this have something to do with Susan's injury?
David's words jolted Robert, and he immediately dropped to his knees on the floor. He must have realized that David had heard everything. Gone was his arrogant demeanor. Now he bit his lip, his face pale with regret.
I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were associated with David, and earlier I spoke so rudely.
Then, raising his voice, he apologized to me directly.
I sincerely apologize.
Mary, standing beside him, quickly apologized too.
My associate. That's why you're apologizing.
That's not what I meant.
That's despicable. You should be ashamed of yourself.
It seemed David had heard everything. He scolded Robert and Mary, furious at their behavior.
And Emily,
Yes.
how could you speak to Susan that way after all she's done to raise you?
I'm sorry.
David then patted James on the shoulder.
Well, I'll be leaving too. I have no interest in staying for such a disgusting wedding.
James nodded repeatedly, his gratitude evident for David standing up for us. Robert and Mary looked up with tearful eyes, apologizing again. Emily stood there pale, frozen in shock. Her beautiful dress sharply contrasted with her darkened expression.
It looks like the taxi is here. Shall we go?
Yes. Just then, a staff member came to let me know the taxi had arrived. James and Sarah stood up with me. David also walked away, followed by his company's employees who had been invited. Their actions triggered the rest of the guests, who also began preparing to leave.
Please wait, it's about to start.
Mary desperately tried to stop David, but he didn't pause. She frantically tried to stop the others from leaving too.
Sorry, but I can't celebrate this.
If everyone's leaving, this can't even be called a wedding anymore.
One by one, the guests said things like this as they headed for the exit. Mary was left standing there, unable to say a word.
Mom, are you okay?
I'm okay.
I'll carry the bags.
James started walking with me. In the end, following the 70 proxies I had hired, all 300 guests left the venue. Robert and Mary stood there in shock, along with a silent Steve and a sobbing Emily. Once all the guests were gone, I left the venue, leaning on my crutches. That night, while relaxing at home, the doorbell rang. James was in the bath, and Sarah was in her room. Reluctantly, I grabbed my crutches and went to the door to greet the visitors. Standing there were Steve and Emily. Emily's eyes were red and puffy from crying. Steve, on the other hand, looked furious. Even though I was exhausted, I braced myself for yet another confrontation. But then, something unexpected happened.
I'm truly sorry for the behavior of my parents and Emily today.
Steve apologized. I widened my eyes in surprise, expecting him to say something harsh instead.
Emily, apologize properly.
I'm sorry.
Hearing our voices, Sarah and James came to the entrance. They widened their eyes at the sight of David and Emily apologizing.
Actually,
Steve began hesitantly. It turned out that he had lived his whole life under Robert and Mary's oppressive rules, feeling like he had no freedom. He was raised to believe that his parents' word was absolute. He could never say no to the confident and overbearing Robert and Mary, and his upbringing had been harsh.
I never felt unloved by them, but there were many difficult moments. I thought it was just normal, that every family was like that, but today finally opened my eyes.
Steve's words were filled with conviction. Tears welled up in his eyes.
I deeply regret not stopping my parents when they insulted you right in front of me.
It was true. While Robert, Mary, and Emily hurled insults at me, Steve never joined in. He had stood there, fists clenched and face tense. I thought it was out of dislike for me, but I must have been wrong. He was likely feeling ashamed of Robert, Mary, Emily, and his own inability to intervene.
Today, I told my parents that I'm cutting ties with them.
Steve said this firmly. Are you sure you're okay? James, Sarah, and I widened our eyes in surprise.
I don't know. My mother was sobbing hysterically.
Seeing our shock, Steve smiled. There was a sense of relief in his smile, as if a burden had finally lifted. But beside him, Emily started trembling. Now that he had broken ties with Robert and Mary, she knew she might be next.
And I can't marry you, Emily.
Hearing the inevitable words, Emily looked up weakly.
Wait, Steve. I already apologized.
An apology doesn't fix this. My decision is final.
Steve gently pulled his hand away from Emily, then turned back to us and apologized again.
I'm truly sorry. and thank you for helping me see the truth.
Steve's face was bright and clear. When I first met him, I thought he was a wonderful man, and now I knew I wasn't wrong. I smiled at him. It's not your fault. I hope you find your happiness.
Mom.
Emily called out to me, seeking help as I sent Steve off. But if he stayed with Emily, he would only suffer. Let it go. You can't be his wife. Steve smiled at my words. Then he gave us a final farewell and left. After that, Emily quit her temp job. Or rather, she was so depressed that she couldn't go to work anymore. She had assumed that being favored by Robert and Mary was enough, but the person she should have cared about most was Steve. At 32 years old, single, jobless, and with $80,000 in debt from the wedding expenses. Since half the cost was split with Robert and Mary, Emily's share was $40,000. On top of that, the proxy service cancellation on the wedding day incurred a 100% cancellation fee. This brought her total debt to $55,000. Of course, I had no intention of paying it for her. I knew she genuinely cared about Steve, so I left her alone for a while. But when 6 months passed with no change, James and I kicked Emily out.
You're abandoning me? Even though you are my parents.
Emily protested, just like she always did. But at 32, it was hardly abandonment. If that's what you think, so be it. It'll be better for you in the long run. I learned through Emily that spoiling her was not the answer. James also received a call from David. Since many employees had attended the wedding, everyone at work knew what had happened. Because of this, Robert faced cold stares from his co-workers and now worked with his head down. It turned out Robert had a good reputation at work. That's why the incident came as such a shock to his colleagues. Robert and Mary, having lost their trust and their son Steve, they were surely destined for a lonely old age. A year has passed since then, and Sarah's wedding is set. I reached out to Emily, who left 6 months ago, but she didn't reply. She's probably too jealous of Sarah to attend. It's like her own words came back to haunt her.
Emily doesn't have to come. She probably wouldn't be happy for me anyway.
It's true. Inviting someone who doesn't want to celebrate is pointless.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. So much. I smiled and nodded at James' comment. I'm certain Sarah's wedding will be so wonderful that it will make us forget the bitterness of Emily's.